Good afternoon, esteemed guests, and welcome to Showcasing Public-Private Partnerships Approaches in Southeast Europe. I'm Andrija Mladenović, Project Manager at CEP, as Miloš said, and it is my great honor to serve as a moderator for this intellectually stimulating panel discussion that we are about to have. As we all know, public-private partnerships are becoming increasingly imperative in today's world. They offer a unique opportunity for public bodies, civil society organizations, and media to collaborate and mutually benefit from each other's legal acumen, analytical proficiency, and watchdog functions. By synergizing resources and expertise, we can accomplish much more than we could ever do independently. So today we have a distinguished panel of speakers who will be illuminating how public-private partnerships can enhance internal anti-corruption risk assessment and management in particular public bodies. And they will also be delving into the innovative monitoring anti-corruption policy implementation, or shortened MACPI. So MACPI tool, which is a very valuable instrument, I think, for achieving the aforementioned goal. So before we start, I'll shortly introduce our panelists. First, we have Dr. Aleksandar Gerganov, Director of the Sociological program at the Center for Study of Democracy. He has been a part of CSD as well as Vitosha Research Agency since 2009 and has contributed himself to the development of the MACPI tool. Next, we have Ksenija Mitrović, Head of Education, Anti-Corruption Plans and Strategy Sector at the Agency for Prevention of Corruption of Serbia. And she has over 10 years of experience in the field of corruption prevention and public administration reform. And she's also responsible for cooperation between civil society organizations and the agency. Then we have Danka Andonovski. She is a city council member for investments and project management in the city of Kragujevac, where she joined team in March 2022. And she has over almost 20 years of experience working in the Serbian Railways public company, where she held various roles, including head of the Director General's office, as well as the International Affairs Center Director. Lastly, we have Aleksandar Đorđević. He is a National Program Officer at UNODC in Belgrade. He is a lawyer with a technical background in anti-corruption and public procurement. And currently he is engaged on supporting the implementation of the asset recovery and anti-corruption portfolio of UNODC in the Western Balkans. I'm confident that the speakers will provide valuable insights and pragmatic examples of how public-private partnerships can be utilized to combat corruption and promote transparency and accountability in the entire Southeast Europe. So I invite you to recline, relax, enjoy the discussion, and remember that when it comes to fighting corruption, every little bit helps. So let's work together to make a difference. Brief reminder before we continue for those live with us today or those who joined us online. So please keep in mind that we'll have about 10 minutes in the end for questions from the audience. Thank you. And I think we can begin the discussion perhaps with Dr. Gerganov. So I was wondering if you could provide us with an overview of the MACPI methodology that we just mentioned. Tell us more about its application in anti-corruption efforts. How does it work? What are the key steps, perhaps components involved in its implementation?
Okay. Thank you for the question and for the introduction, and thank you all for participating today in this important event. So as mentioned, MACPI stands for Monitoring Anti-Corruption Policy Implementation, and this instrument is an instrument intended for the management of public organizations that we came up with after more than 30 years of experience in fighting corruption in Bulgaria and in the region, big part of which was public-private partnerships that started for the Center for the Study of Democracy since 1998, even before that, but in 1998 Coalition 2000 was formed, which main purpose was to create the legal background for fighting corruption. And with years, we had quite a success in Bulgaria with diminishing corruption and with introducing the national legislation for fighting corruption. However, at some point, we found out that there is some gap between the legislation, which we deemed quite good, and the actual results we were expecting to see. And this issue was mentioned several times in previous presentations, and this is how MACPI was born. It was intended to see how national level legislation actually works at the level of public organizations. And if I could have my slides, please, I will walk you very briefly through what MACPI is. As I mentioned, it is an instrument intended. Can I have my slides, please? Okay. So you can see that we developed this in 2014 and 15 with the help of DigiHome, and what we developed was, it was assessed very highly by the Commission. And since then, we've implemented this in probably more than 30 organizations now. We stopped counting at some point. You can see some of the different types of organizations like municipalities, customs, police, traffic police and border police, multiple organizations and countries. In terms of countries, we covered most of the countries from this region, as well as Italy, Spain, and we are trying to expand even further because the feedback we get from the public organizations is that this tool is very useful. And of course, I will be focusing on the success stories of this public-private partnership, but I should mention that not all our attempts have been successful. There have been setbacks, public organizations that didn't want to do this, even if it is either obligatory to self-assess for corruption and risks and for anti-corruption, or it is highly recommended. And we thought that this was, some colleagues said that of course, that the corrupt will not want to assess themselves for anti-corruption and how successful it is, but we rather think that this is lack of communication and lack of trust in each other, and events like this one will contribute significantly to overcoming this issue. And just to very briefly mention what the tool is, it consists of several instruments that are basically surveys among different target groups, employees of the organization, but also external experts and clients, that is citizens or companies that are in contact with the organization. And we use the information, the quantitative information from all these sources to assess different activities of the organization as well as different policies quantitatively. On several indicators we have developed. And the different groups, the intention is to juxtapose the answers from different groups so that we have as objective measure as possible. And there are multiple types of analysis possible with MACPI, but I will focus on the long-term monitoring today because the idea of MACPI is not to be done once and to pinpoint all the problems of the organization. It is intended as a monitoring tool, as the name suggests, and the full benefit of using this instrument is to do it regularly and to act upon finding of vulnerabilities that the tool can show very well. and I will probably later tell you about some success stories. But to finish my presentation of the instrument, this is the diagnostic cycle as we imagine it. The first is just a benchmarking scan that can point to some potential problems and can provide advice to the management of the organization how to build even better anti-corruption setup, even if the organization is already good in this respect. Then multiple MACPI implementations are done later in 1 year or in 2 years, and the progress is observed. And ideally, the indicators that show how robust the anti-corruption setup is show that there is improvement. Or if there isn't, or there are other reasons for this, then very particular policy advices can be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Aleksandar. So now that we all understand what MACPI tool is, how it works, what it does, I would like to move on to our next panelist, Ms. Danka Andonovski. So I would like to ask you if you could please elaborate on the research that MACPI research that we conducted. When I say we, I mean the European Policy Center in partnership with the city of Kragujevac. So just a brief introduction, how did this partnership come about? What were some of the key findings and recommendations that emerged from the research? And perhaps what do you consider to be main benefits of using the MACPI methodology for the overall anti-corruption efforts?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Andrea. And I would also like to thank you all, organizers, for inviting me to take part in this great conference. And when I talked with Andrea 2 days ago, I understood that when we are saying PPP, we are addressing to public-private partnership contracts and being in the investment sector. I thought that I should speak about that. But I have to say that I am even more thrilled that I have the opportunity to speak about the public, that means citizens, approach to the anti-corruption measures on the one side and the public sector on the other side. So how everything started in December 2021, European Policy Center contacted the city of Kragujevac Authority Services with this initiative that we do use the MACPI tool to do a research about current efficiency of anti-corruption measures within the city. And as the result of that cooperation, we conducted this research, to be more exact, 2 connected research on 2 target groups. One target groups were the citizens of the Kragujevac and the other employees within the municipality. And I here have a brief presentation. Can we say it? Thanks. So, as you can see, one group was made of, to be precise, 621 people, citizens, who were asked about their experience in the contact with public officials within the municipality. And the other group was made of 206 employees within the municipality with purpose to find out what are their attitudes regarding anti-corruption measures or efficiency of the existing measures. And if you ask me, I won't keep to the figures much. You can see everything in the presentation. We did the research during the one in June, one in October last year. But the results are more than interesting. First of all, the basis is that the greatest percent of the asked citizens were in contact with the authorities regarding assembly, city council, mayor's office, and then regarding the other group results, regarding the public officials, those requirements were put down on the lower levels to some other public services such as human resources, urbanism, and other relevant sectors. So citizens addressed to the higher levels, and then the higher levels were putting these requests to the lower authority service. What is the key finding of this research, according to me, is that more than 90%, actually 95% of the citizens stated that nobody from the municipality, no public officials, asked them for the money or any other kind of bribe. And more than 90% of all citizens said that they didn't feel like they're being asked to offer something, anything. This is a very good result. But what, on the contrary, we have, regarding the same question on the public side, on the public official side, they said that the more many citizens were offering bribe by themselves without being asked. They feel pressured that citizens are offering the bribe themselves. It sounds contradictory, but when we look the subgroup, sub-target group, who exposed and expressed actually that they were asked some kind of bribe or that they were under some kind of pressure, and mostly this is 50% of the people who expressed that they had some problem with inspections, precisely with inspections within the municipality. They said they think the reason for that is habit, because they will speed up the procedure in that way, or because this is the thing of mentality. The greatest percent, 45%, said that they were asked to offer the bribe because of speeding up the procedure. When you get together all of these results, now I'm not looking at my presentation because I know these all figures and you can see them. When we just gather all of this data, on the one side, citizens who says they were not asked for the bribe, in greatest possible percent. In the other side, officials who said the bribe was offered to them. And on the third side, that they were expected on the target group that said, yes, we were expected to give something because to speed up the procedure. Then you can see that there is something wrong with the system. Obviously, the result of this very usable research show the way that we should go. Something is wrong from the head. You know, we are not showing the people what they're supposed to do. If there is a law, this law should be applied to all groups. There should not be exceptions. Citizens can see that, you know, there is a law, but there are some exceptions, and I want to be that exception. So I will offer something to someone in order to get my job done. And this is how the things function, and they see themselves, you know, in that gap. So I think that we should send to them a clearer picture. And this research is showing to us what kind of picture we should send to them. That we should stick to the law, that we should make no exceptions, and what is also great about this research is that the research itself showed how much or how insufficient citizens and people who work within the municipality are introduced with the measures that are already being applied. We don't have some kind of campaigns, we don't have results that are showing how far we get away with this issue. We don't have actually the showcases which are the examples of good practice to show the people how they should react, how they should behave in such situations. We don't have actually open formats to give them some guidance. And what is also very important to say, that these results of this study are currently being used for making of anti-corruption plan, which is going to be finished this year. And also that we are going to raise awareness using this data through some new measures, anti-corruption measures, also conducted within the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you for that very informative presentation. I would like now to go back to central level of governance and to hear from Ms. Ksenija Mitrović. So what do you think are the opportunities for the civil society organizations to participate in anti-corruption efforts? So can you provide maybe some examples of what the agency, what kind of partnerships the agency has with civil society organizations, and how these partnerships have been beneficial so far for the agency itself? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for this question, and thank you for inviting Agency for Prevention of Corruption to participate in this conference. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Agency for Prevention of Corruption conducts public competitions for allocation of grants to civil society organizations since its establishment. Each of these public competitions has a general goal and several specific goals, usually connected with agency competencies. Agency adopted also a rule book for allocation of funds, the document in which all prerequisites the civil society organization has to fulfill in order to apply for financial means are defined, and also criteria for the assessment of the projects. We tried to make this process as transparent as possible. So all the materials connected with public competition we publish on our website. And so far we carried out 14 public competitions, through which 28 projects were rewarded with total sum of more of 360,000 euros. All those financial means are from the budget of the Republic of Serbia. But besides public competitions, civil society organizations can cooperate with the agency in implementation of different projects in accordance with our guidelines. The only thing the CCO has to do is to submit a draft of project proposal to the agency with a request for partnership or cooperation, depending on the level of agency engagement in implementation of those activities. You asked for some examples of successful partnerships. As you heard, we had more than 40 different kind of cooperations, so it's hard to choose some like great stories because they're all great for us, but I will highlight 3 of them. The first is connected with overseeing the implementation of national anti-corruption strategy. We heard in the opening remarks how this national anti-corruption strategy is important for fighting corruption. Agency has the competence to oversee the implementation of action plan of national anti-corruption strategy. Last national anti-corruption strategy was adopted in 2013. It was valid until 2018. It was very complex and extensive document with more than 53 goals, 113 measures, and 250 activities. What was the task of the agency? We collected the information about the implementation of the activities from the responsible entities, responsible institutions. We draft a report with the recommendations for improving the implementation, and each year we submit that report to the National Assembly. But we had only one source of the information, that was responsible entities, responsible institutions. So we thought, why shouldn't we do something new, something that hasn't been done before? Let's involve civil society organizations in monitoring action plan. And we chose 6 civil society organizations through public competition. Together with them, we developed methodology for monitoring in different areas, such as police, judiciary, public finance, media, education and sports, etc., etc. In the end, we have 6 high-quality reports, which was used with their findings to enrich our agency report, and we use those findings also as a unique mechanism for cross-checking the data we collected from responsible entities. The second type of projects are focused on enhancing capacities of local self-government units for drafting local anti-corruption plans. Danka mentioned local anti-corruption plans, and I have several questions for you, Danka. No, it's so interesting subject. I don't know if you are familiar with, but according to the action plan for Chapter 23, each local self-government unit in the Republic of Serbia has an obligation to draft and adopt local anti-corruption plan and form the body for the monitoring of its implementation. Local anti-corruption plan is basically a public policy document based on corruption risk assessment in the area of the work of the local self-government unit, and has the goal to increase transparency, accountability, and in the work of local self-government. Agency published model of local anti-corruption plan and also the methodology for implementation, but apparently that wasn't enough. We were contacted by many towns and municipalities asking for some kind of help because they had limited capacities related to skills and knowledge of the staff. So we also thought that it would be a good idea to connect civil society organizations who are experienced in drafting public policies so they could help local self-government units to draft and adopt their local anti-corruption plan. And since 2018, we helped 18 towns and municipalities, among others also the city of Kragujevac, who is currently working with Transparency Serbia on their new local anti-corruption plan. I must say you adopted first in 2017 and it was very, very good. So many of them, that's a huge thing for small municipalities of Serbia. When we talk, we usually think about Belgrade, but city of Belgrade, for example, doesn't have their local anti-corruption plan, also city of Niš. But for small municipalities, that's a huge thing. They have help from Transparency Serbia or Birodi or any other well-known and established CCO. And they couldn't have that chance if they weren't involved in this kind of cooperation with the agency. And third type of partnership I'm especially proud of. Why? Because one of the panelists in previous panels said that he couldn't remember the name of the second anti-corruption body in Serbia. The name is Agency for Prevention of Corruption, and that is a commonplace. That is a common opinion. In 2016, Center for Investigative Journalism of Serbia, CINS, approached to us with the idea of making specific follow-up of all the proceedings agency initiated before competent prosecutor's office and misdemeanor courts. Why is that important? We initiate proceedings, but we don't know what happened at the end because courts and prosecutor's office don't send us feedback. We don't know about the verdicts or how those proceedings ended. So, as a result of our cooperation, agency gave all the data about the proceedings to Center of Investigative Journalism, and we have the database of 2,800 cases we initiated with the information how those proceedings ended. This database is published on the website of Center of Investigative Journalism, and unfortunately, it covered the period of time of 2010, when the agency was established, until 2018, because the financing of that project stopped. So it's a question of sustainability of great projects, but that's a topic for some other conference maybe. So these are highlights for now.
Thank you, Ksenija. I think you pinpointed a very good topic for some further discussion, and that's work of the Serbian prosecution. But I would like now to go a bit more up the ladders and reach the international level, and that's what we're going to do with Mr. Aleksandar Đorđević, who is up next. And Aleksandar, I would like to ask you to explain to us what is the significance of the Article 13 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption for the overall anti-corruption framework in Southeast Europe. So how does the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative together, how they work with civil society and private sector actors in the implementation of this article? So maybe you could provide some specific examples of your work and their impact in Southeast Europe region.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much to the organizers for convening us here today. It's a very interesting forum, interesting discussion, interesting panelists. First of all, I would like to briefly provide information on the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. We are part of the United Nations Secretariat, and as a UN agency, we are mandated to be the guardian of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. To date, 189 countries in the world joined the convention, and UNODC is the secretariat of the convention and provides support to its implementation. In the region, I must say that UNODC works under the overall umbrella of the regional program for Southeastern Europe and the regional office for Southeastern Europe. We have a number of projects that are associated with anti-corruption, and all of them are linked to the implementation of the convention. When we mention Article 13, the Article 13 calls upon the state parties of the convention to enhance the participation of society in implementation of the provisions of the convention. It encourages the state countries to allow the society, individuals, non-government organizations to take part in the fight against corruption in the country. This is done on a global level, what we can observe through various methods. We heard some of them. We heard implementation of projects that are given by the Agency for Prevention of Corruption in Serbia to NGOs to support basically in this case, for example, when we are speaking about public administration bodies, local administrations. So that's the whole idea behind the Article 13. What we are doing with the governments from the region and with the society from the region is that we are providing support to them to understand how they can involve, how they can build synergies between themselves in fighting against corruption. One of the things that we are doing regularly for years now, together with our colleagues from the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, is the organization of a multi-stakeholder workshops, where we invite representatives from the institutions, mandated to fight against corruption, such as the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Justice, anti-corruption agencies, and etc., with participants from the non-government sector, from the civil society organizations, individuals, but also the private sector. So each one of them has a role in implementation of the convention, and each of those groups can support the implementation. During those workshops, we are providing them on insights how the implementation review mechanism of UNCAC works. We will speak about it later, and how they can engage themselves in the anti-corruption work in the region. We, as the new UNODC, are also in this region tasked to be the Secretariat of the Regional Anti-Corruption and Illicit Finance Roadmap for the Western Balkan jurisdictions. The roadmap is one of the UNODC global platforms for combating corruption. We have such similar platforms in South America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia. And as a regional platform, we have all the Western Balkan jurisdictions participating there and working on the goals that they have identified. The regional roadmap builds on the momentum generated in the Berlin process, and by the Security Steering Commitments Group from the Berlin process, UNODC and RAI were tasked to support the countries in the region to develop this roadmap. The roadmap has three main goals or pillars of fight against corruption, and the first one is related to strengthening the public procurement system and combating corruption in public procurement, including in times of emergency and in health procurement. The second goal of the roadmap is to strengthen the asset declaration system in the region. And the third one is strengthening the criminal justice response to corruption and also creating a regional network of law enforcement and prosecutors' offices from the region to support the joint investigation and cross-border investigation of corruption cases. Initially, the civil society element wasn't included in the development of the roadmap, but last year we held a number of meetings and conferences where we invited the representatives from the civil society sector and from the jurisdictions from the region to discuss how the civil society can support the overall implementation of the roadmap. And on the conference that we held in Skopje, North Macedonia in December, 1 month ago, we had pretty good presentations from the civil society sector that were very well accepted by the institutions. And for this year, we are planning even more to work together, including the civil society and the institutions from the region in combating corruption. So we managed to develop a synergy between the public and a non-government sector, and we're very much looking forward to continue working in that regard in the next period as well. That will be all for this part. So later on, if there are any questions, I'm here to answer. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the presentation on the Article 13, Mr. Đorđević. So now I would like to go back once again to the local level and get a more get a perspective that's more in regards to the future. So what's up next and what we need to do. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Andonovski, what are the areas in which civil society support is currently lacking on a local level in terms of anti-corruption efforts? So what are those areas, and how does the lack of such support affect the ability of the local government to combat corruption? So what steps can be taken to increase involvement of the civil society on a local level and then also increase its support to your government?
Okay, thank you for your question. I don't think we lack the civil society support. I don't think at all that we lack this. And I will give you an example for that. For several years now, we have public debate on the city budget. So every year in October, when we are making the draft of the budget for the following year. We target, for example, 12 days. This year was from October 12 to October 26, 14 days, when all citizens are invited to say their opinion on the draft of the budget for the following year. And they have several ways to do that. They can make it via email address announced on the website of the city, or there are some boxes within the municipality building. They can put their suggestions in those boxes, or they can directly contact, for example, public services department. And then, after that, I think on October 20, we had an open public argument, public debate, when the city councillor for financement, he explained the city budget draft, and everybody was asked to raise some questions, to make their suggestions and everything. As a result, we had approximately 16 suggestions officially made by individuals, city organizations, some community levels, for example, like inhabitants of one street, which are asking for pavement in this street, companies and things like that. I mean, we have many different applicants for some changes within the city budget. As a result, from 16 proposals, we immediately adopted more than half, because it turned out that their remarks and their suggestions, their needs are just fitting in our plans. And all other we took into consideration. We just didn't, resign and cut it off. We just took them into consideration how they could be realized. And this is one really good example of a good practice, and everybody are satisfied because of this. Also, and citizens actually are showing great initiative to participate in such kind of joint decision-making. Also, we have, that in Kragujevac there is a state data center, and we also have our local data center. We are the first city in Serbia who made open data portal in such visual appearance that every citizen can open this data and read how much money we are giving for the heating, public heating, for the firemen, for the, pavement of the streets. They can see every single dinar is going for, which works or which segment in the city. And they're really satisfied because of that. So I don't see that we are in the lack of that kind of support. I see that we should motivate the citizens to be more involved, to have the more courage, to report the problems, to give them, as Ksenija said just a few minutes ago, she said, we don't have the results. We didn't have the results when we, for example, say that there was some, corruptive activity, and we give that to the court, but we don't have the result. What happened with the people who made it? We should motivate the citizens more to be open about the corruption, to say what is bothering them, to encourage them with the results of anti-corruption measures. Because when they see the results of anti-corruption measures, they won't offer some bribe in order to finish their job quickly. Then it's possible. We should encourage them with our behavior. We cannot expect them to change something big, but we should encourage them to change the things. And I can, say personally that I sometimes were also in the position when I was expected to give a bribe. From the perspective of a citizen, of the simple, human who is living in this country, you are faced with the situation, okay, if I say this to someone, what will happen? What will change? Will anything change? This is the thing. We have to encourage them, to tell them that something will change, you know, just to raise their voice. I think this is...
Right.
This was an answer to the question.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Danka. It's an interesting observation, but a question came up to my mind while you were speaking, and I would like to ask you to address it perhaps quickly in a minute or less if you can, because you work on a local level, so perhaps you observe things that you do, so consequences of your efforts faster in comparison to your colleagues working on a central level, right? And I was wondering if there are any unintended consequences that you observe from time to time of the anti-corruption efforts that you implement.
Well, I can give you an example for that, for this unintended consequences of anti-corruption measures. My background, as you mentioned on the very beginning, is within state railways. Now it's infrastructure company, Serbian Railways, but it was, you know, Serbian Railways public enterprise. And there was one situation. We, as Serbian Railways, we are a member of a community of European Railways. And it's an entity in the Brussels. Every single year, the president of CR, Community of European Railways, is coming to Serbia and to neighboring countries just to visit how we are going, how we are moving on. And it's a lobby group, of course, which is lobbying for the rail transport contra the vice versa, the road transport, of course. Really strong one. So in one day, every single year, he visits Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Employment, and Ministry of Authority. This is Ministry of Transportation and Civil Engineering. And finally, he's coming to us to have a meeting. So it was maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago. It was Mr. Johannes Lodewijk. He was the CEO of Community of European Railways. And after visiting all three ministries at 12 o'clock, he came to the library hall within the National Railways, all directors, GM, everybody. And he said to us like this, okay, I was one ministry, second, third. You have money, you have credits, you have projects. So where the hell is the problem? You have everything. Why are you standing? Why is nothing happening? And the president of the managing board of directors, he said, I will tell you where's the problem. To release one project, just from the railways, we need 7 signatures. 7. First, the director of finance department, and then the assistant general manager for legal affairs, and then, you know, he was just saying the names. And usually, on the third name, on the third person, this contract stands, you know, just, it's there, and it's stuck. The first one who gives a phone call and says, what's happening with the project? He's the one involved, and he's the one who is taking the bribe, because he's interested for the things to move. So, in this example, I mean, and I saw that also in the municipality, for example, in property department, if you know, you want to solve some problem, and then you're taking some file and say, okay, this is really important. Why this file? Why it's not another file? You have some personal interest in that. You can see that there are some unintentional consequences because of applying anti-corruption measures. This is unintentional consequences. I cannot explain to my colleagues within the municipality that it doesn't matter, they should just work on every single file and it's going to be finished sooner or later. Which file are you using? That means that you have an interest, personal interest, to finish that job. And I think that we should pay more attention to these things, because this is also connected with maybe Serbian mentality or habits, as the studies show. Thank you very
Danka.
much.
Thank you. So it seems that there are some systemic failures that happen from time to time that we miss to see as independent observers rather than people directly involved in the government do see. Because we're running out of time, I would like to go fast to Mr. Gerganov, who promised us that he will elaborate more on some specific examples of how the MACPI methodology worked somewhere else in practice, so other than in city of Kragujevac. So maybe what are the objectives and goals, what were objectives and goals of these implementations, and what are some of the key successes or breakthroughs that you achieved through the implementation?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question, and just to mention that one of the intentions MACPI has is not only to improve and to introduce additional anti-corruption measures, but it also aims to drop down unnecessary anti-corruption measures that are not that effective but are bulky, increase bureaucratization. And this is one use of the tool that is seldom focused on, but this is something that I think can also be very helpful, because sometimes there are too many anti-corruption measures, and this monitoring instrument, it helps finding out which actually work and which don't, and just increase workload, stress, and everything else. So if I can have my slides, I know that you don't see much on these small screens, but there is one particular graph I'd like you to see later. And I will just wanted to mention why we focus on administrative corruption today when the bigger topic of the event is state capture. And we also, of course, have tools for assessing state capture pressure, and also we have recommendations what to do. However, it's very, very hard to tackle high-level corruption. And one thing that we found out from 30 years of research and working in this field is that administrative corruption, when it is high, it actually decreases the resilience of the society as a whole. And our other instruments show that society in the region is losing faith in anti-corruption, and society doesn't trust the government at all as a whole. So administrative corruption, while some call it petty corruption, it's actually very, very, very important, and it's very critical because it undermines the immunity of society and its ability to fight higher level corruption, where the focus is mainly on society who can vote in the end and choose one party or another party. So we believe that improving anti-corruption ultimately also is probably the best way to address state capture risks too, even if we, of course, work on state capture as well. And I will not go into results and findings. There are some general trends that we discovered from doing this exercise over 30 times. For example, that specific policies are better than more general documental policies like codes of ethics, trainings, and so on. Specific policies that tackle a particular corruption risk that is well known to the organization are more effective. And of course, having processes done electronically where there is no interaction between citizens or companies and public officials, it's better because it reduces the risks. But I would like to I would like to focus on what is for the public organizations to gain from all this. They can do this exercise by themselves. They can self-assess. So why should CSOs be involved in all this? Well, on the one hand, CSOs have the expertise. They have the methodological expertise. They have the analytical expertise, legal expertise. They usually have very strong teams with huge experience, and this is something that the CSOs can really contribute that often public organizations don't. Even if they are strong in one aspect, they are not in another, and CSOs can bridge this gap in knowledge and really help this. But on the other hand, it is also very important that CSOs provide independent assessment, while self-assessment would rarely be seen by the public as something really objective. So most of the plans, they assume that the organizations self-assess themselves, or other organizations assess other organizations, and this is probably perceived by the citizens as, even when done with goodwill, it is perceived as a vicious cycle of one corrupt organization assessing another one. So adding another party in this process really could help increase the trust in anti-corruption efforts, which, as I mentioned from other tools, we see it is extremely low in this region. So to show you one example of a success story we've had is the Bulgarian public police, and I will use the opportunity to comment on this corruption pressure. It's related to the question we ask to citizens and officials whether they have been offered a bribe or asked for a bribe. And I heard some reflections on this question, and the truth is that this is a methodological trick we used, because if you ask citizens, have you offered to give some bribes to the officials, they of course will deny. They say, no, not me, of course, I would never. This is the socially acceptable answer. But if we ask them, has the official asked you for a bribe? Then they say, yeah, it has happened. And how do we ask the officials who are asking for this bribe? If we ask them, have you asked some citizens for a bribe by any chance last year? Then they, of course, would say, oh, I would never do this. But if you ask them, okay, have they offered you a bribe? Then they willingly admit how much pressure they experience, how low their salaries are, and at the same time everyone is offering the bribes. And this is just a way we phrase the question, but the important thing is that when bribes are being offered or asked for, our instruments show that there are usually bribes changing hands. They are this indicator, which we call corruption pressure, it's highly correlated with actual corruption transactions. And we don't look at this indicator as a way to blame the citizens or the officials. Corruption is always a two-side process, and both parties are to gain from it something, and it is illegal for both parties. We look at this indicator as a way to see how robust the anti-corruption setup of an organization is, because our thinking is that the strongest the anti-corruption measures in these organizations are, the lower the corruption pressure will be. And I heard thoughts exactly in this direction, and I'm really glad about that. And our success story, and with this I will finish, is the Bulgarian border police, where we did our pilot MACPI in 2015, and corruption pressure was 17% then. Next year we repeated it pro bono, because it was not part of a project, it was not financed. We did it pro bono just to help border police improve further. They reached out and asked us for this, and we already saw a 1 percentage point decline in corruption pressure. And our latest implementation in border police last year, it already shows 10% corruption pressure. And of course, this is not a small number. We ideally would like to see something below 5%, but it is still good. It shows improvement, and it shows that they have used the instrument to really improve their anti-corruption, while there are, of course, always problems, issues, and things to improve. We are happy that at least this instrument has helped them make their anti-corruption setup better.
Okay. Thank you, Aleksandar, very much. Your knowledge and experience on MACPI tool is quite impressive and I think was truly valuable. So up next, I would like to ask Ms. Mitrović, and I would kindly ask you to keep it very short because we're short on time. So you talked about present time cooperation between the agency and civil society. So just like a quick reflection on what would improve the existing cooperation in the future. So what are the areas where agency would benefit from additional partnerships or perhaps more meaningful partnerships with the agency? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I think we should intensify the communications with civil society organizations. We had regular meetings and workshops before coronavirus pandemic, and that disturbed that good practice. So now we are trying to make up what we missed in the last 2 years. And definitely civil society and agency should push each other from our comfort zones. So last years, I said we put focus on drafting local anti-corruption plans, but I think that the time has come to explore some more ambitious topics. Aleksandar mentioned a roadmap and 3 pillars of roadmap. So we would highly appreciate involvement of civil society in the questions or issues regarding public officials' conflict of interest, and of course public procurement within the purview of the agency, and also asset declaration and verification. So those are topics we are expecting help from civil society in the future. I wouldn't tell anything further about that because I think it would be specific goals of our next public competition. So this was a little teaser and I will stop.
Thank you, Ksenija, very much. So, well, surprisingly, our good governance report of the second year on the project is covering exactly those topics. So,
okay.
It was a good guess, I guess, to choose those topics. Thank you for shedding light on the importance of strengthening and expanding further meaningful partnerships with civil society organizations. And I would like to ask Mr. Đorđević if he could explain briefly the mechanism for the review of implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, because I think that's really important, especially for the representatives of civil society organizations. So how does it work? What are the key steps in its implementation, and perhaps what is the role of the civil society? So how should they approach this subject, and how should they get involved?
Thanks, Andrea. So I see we are time bound, so I'll try to be as much as focused on the main milestones in this process. Just an introduction, the implementation review mechanism of UNCAC was established after the UNCAC was adopted, and the implementation review mechanism itself has terms of reference by which those reviews are being conducted. The first cycle of the implementation review mechanism was covering the chapters 3 and chapter 4 of UNCAC. The chapter 3 is on criminalization, and the chapter 4 on international cooperation. And the second cycle that is ongoing right now is on the chapters 2 and chapter 5. Chapter 2 is related to preventive measures, and chapter 5 is related to asset recovery. The implementation review mechanism is something that was negotiated between the state parties of the convention, and its purpose is not to provide ranking of the state parties, but its only purpose is to identify the deficiencies and the gaps in implementation of the convention, and how through a targeted technical assistance those deficiencies can be overcome. The first step in the implementation review mechanism is the self-assessment checklist, which is being populated by the country that is under review. In this process, starting from this first step, the society can be involved by having the government to invite the civil society to support the populating of the self-assessment checklist and organizing, for example, roundtables or workshops to discuss, for example, each of the areas of the convention, the provisions, to what extent they were implemented in the country. The second step in the implementation review mechanism is the country visit. The UNCA review mechanism works like you have two countries that are reviewing the third country. The third country under review is hosting the other two countries and their experts that are coming for the evaluation itself. So they are looking at the self-assessment checklist and looking to what extent they have fulfilled the provisions of the convention. In this part, the society can be involved by having the government to invite the participation of society in the meetings with the reviewing countries and to enable them to express their opinion on the level of the implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in the chapters that are concerned with that review. On the final step is the development of the report of the review, where again, the civil society, not only civil society, but the whole society can be involved into that process by providing their views and comments on the final report and the executive summary that is being produced at the end of the implementation review mechanism. So as you can see, there is a plenty of possibilities where the government and the society can work together and can build synergies in this implementation review mechanism, which can result in a very objective a report that will identify the deficiencies of the system of the country that is under review. I would like also to point at the end that there is no government in the world that can fight corruption on itself. So that synergy that is built in this process between the society and the governments, it's something that can bring and can develop an efficient tools for fight against corruption. And we as a global UN agency, we are looking forward to support the countries from the region into establishing and boosting those synergies. Thanks.
Thank you, Aleksandar. So that was a very informative presentation. And I think very valuable for civil society organization representatives. And now I would like to immediately proceed to questions. But before that, I would like to, of course, thank our distinguished panelists for sharing their valuable insights and experiences. So now we're welcoming questions from the audience. For those joining us online, we'll try to include you as well. But please keep your questions brief and to the point so that we can accommodate as many as possible. So first we'll start with those who are with us in the room. So who would like to go first?
Okay, hello everybody.
Hello.
Local self-government is always a good topic because I'm from the decentralization CSO oriented. So first I would like to congratulate the agency for switching their point, because as we were crossing roads before, and yeah, the key issue is, we like to say, the easiest way to hide the paper is in library. I think we cannot see corruption in a proper way because we're hiding behind numbers. Like my famous quote when talking about the agency is that we have from 145, we have 111 with plans, we have 37 with bodies.
38.
And when we are coming to the end, why we have a body to follow implementation plan? I don't think that there are any reports produced in 22. Maybe there is one. And that's the point. Why do you have the whole system if there is no results? And even if you have a report, what to do with that report? So I would like to offer our expertise to maybe add on and to see if we can work directly on the results. And that's the point why we don't have interested citizens in the point. And the same is with the budget system participatory budget, because it's a little bit more than just started with August. It should start in January, February with forming a team for participatory budgeting, and then do things properly through, as he described in citizen participatory budget.
You mean citizens?
Thank you.
But anyway, just again, we can also, we have some of our members of coalition in Kragujevac, so we can work on improving. But definitely, the good thing is that we have cities that are moving ahead, because outside of those 111, we have all major cities outside of anti-corruption. Then we have the 80% of annual total budget for local self-government still outside of the any system for control.
Thank you.
It's more like a statement than
Thank you.
Great.
Ksenija is much better.
Thank you very much. We would highly appreciate if you address the agency with your idea or maybe a draft project proposal. We will be happy to, yeah.
And if I may say, if I understood you correctly, you like to propose that somebody, that the citizens actually influence the creation of the draft of the budget during the year. Roughly said. Yeah, yes. Oh, okay, okay. Okay, okay, understand. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
but Daniel,
I understand
so
now.
you don't
I
have
understand.
you don't
We are
have a
open.
mic, so not everyone online is capable of hearing the discussion between you two. So I encourage you to continue this discussion.
Of course,
during
we are open
coffee
to
break.
all ideas. Thank you.
But yeah, it's wonderful that we are
Yeah,
already kind of coming up with some cooperation ideas and potential partnerships that we'll discuss during the coffee break. We have a question over back. I think it's CSD Executive Director Ruslan. So please.
Question and a statement. I'm very happy to hear also that the Serbian Anti-Corruption Agency is so open about cooperation, because actually within CELDI it remained the only agency that didn't join the public-private partnership efforts. All the other agencies in the region we have with CELDI, and I hope that we'll stand to correct this. And my question is, because this is a very practical panel, what do you think is the one thing we need to do this year as cooperation between the public sector, so authorities and civil society, to get our citizens believe in our anti-corruption efforts again? If there is one thing, what would it be? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruslan. So who would like to address this question briefly?
It's a hard one, actually.
It's not
Really
easy
hard.
at
It's
all.
a really hard one.
It's not fair. I think we should continue to work in accordance with the law and in accordance with our competencies. And that's the best thing we can do, to work in accordance with our role. Nothing more, nothing less.
If I may say, I think at the beginning of the conference, Viola or somebody who joined us online mentioned Nikola Gruevski. You know what Nikola Gruevski did in one day, one decision? He arrested something around 300 people because of the corruption. So never again, nothing similar crossed anybody's mind, you know. Those people were working in the hospitals and educational system and things like that. I'm not thinking of anything such, you know, so severe. But maybe some surprising decision that can, you know, just turn everybody's attention to the problem of corruption. Yeah. No, I mean, not so drastically. I'm just saying because you reminded me with this question. Something that can pay, I don't know what it is, but that can pay everybody's attention to the problem of corruption and to its consequences. What is more important?
Okay, thank you both, and thank you, Ruslan, for the question. So we're actually out of time. We breached the time limit for 5 minutes. So I think it would be excellent to end here, although I know there probably are more questions from the audience. But again, I encourage you to to continue in the coffee break. So in conclusion, I would like to express my gratitude to our esteemed panelists for sharing their knowledge and their expertise on the topic of public-private partnership and anti-corruption efforts. We hope that the discussion has been informative, and I'm definitely certain that it was thought-provoking for all of you. So once again, thank you for your attention.